You always want to warm up before you play. You want to get some blood flowing. I do exercises and warm-ups all the time before I play because musicians are very much athletes of the fine motor skills. So we want to make sure that we're taking care of our hands. So here's a couple basic things that I always do. The first one just deals with stretching out the fingers individually, okay? I'll grab a finger and I'll pull back just a little bit on it. This doesn't have to be a lot of pressure, okay? Just enough to stretch it a little bit, and then I will also wiggle the other fingers in the process of doing that. Once again, getting the blood flowing in the whole hand, and I'll do that with each finger one at a time. Just pull back a little bit, little wiggle, pull back a little bit, little wiggle, pull back, little wiggle. Okay, you could do this with both hands, but especially your fretting hand. Second thing I will do is to spread the fingers open a little bit. All right, same thing. You don't have to do a ton of distance, but I'll just do a little bit of stretch, a little bit of stretch, a little bit of stretch. And with every one of these exercises, I'll shake it out a little bit at the end of the exercise. You know, imagine you just washed your hands and you're kind of shaking the water off. Okay, you can also do stretches in the other direction. Okay, so pull down a little bit, do a little wiggle here. Pull down a little bit, get the wiggle going, pull down a little bit, pull down, shake it out, okay? And I'll go through this a couple of times and do each finger, 4 or 5 times in a row just to get the blood flowing. The last thing I do is I like to do a lot of wrist stretches just to stay limber with the wrist, because whether it's fretting hand or picking hand, your wrist needs to be limber at all times. So one of the things I like to do is start with your hands together and just dip a little bit forward, and you'll get this nice stretch, okay? And I will also do that going backwards like this, okay? So I'm kind of going back and forth to get a nice little stretch happening with the wrists, okay? As far as actual technique on the instrument, one thing to make sure of as far as your finger placement when you're playing chords, whether it's open chords or bar chords, always make sure that your finger placements are really close to the fret. A lot of times people go to play chords and their chords are all buzzy and fuzzy sounding because they're not really planting their fingers close enough to the fret. If I'm playing a D chord, I need to make sure that my fingers are right at the edge of the fret. If I'm behind or kind of in the middle of the fret, there's more likelihood that my chord's going to sound fuzzy. Hand in hand with placement is pressure. You need to figure out exactly how much pressure is required to actually sound any note that you are playing. So one of the exercises I like to do with that is, pick any single finger on any single note, okay, and gradually let go of your finger pressure until that note starts to fuzz out. And then gradually start to put pressure back on. And the second the note is clear and clean sounding, that's enough. You don't have to push any harder than that. Years ago, I had a student who was a diesel mechanic, and he had really, really strong hands. And one of his problems when he was first learning chords is that he would over grip a chord to the point where not only was he wasting all this effort as far as squeezing so hard, but he was fretting the chord so hard, he was bending it out of tune. Okay, so if I've got my D chord, all right, if I grip that super hard, it's out of tune now because I'm squeezing so hard and putting so much pressure that I'm overexerting. So I want the notes to be clean. I don't want the notes to be fuzzy, but I don't want to overexert. So really take some time to figure out how much pressure do I actually need to sound a note. And this is true, of course, with bar chord playing. If you're practicing, instead of a full-blown bar chord, just practicing a bar technique, okay, how much pressure do you need to get those notes to sound clear? And you can let go until it's, muffled and fuzzy. And as you start to put pressure on, what is the point where the notes become clear? And stop there. You don't have to put any more pressure than that, okay? This is not a no pain, no gain situation. It shouldn't be painful to actually fret chords. You need just enough physical effort to get a nice clean sound. The final thing I will mention, hand in hand with exercises and just an awareness of how good guitar technique is built, you might try switching to lighter gauge strings, and you might also have your guitar set up by a professional to make sure that the action is nice and low, because that's going to help you, once again, exert less pressure and less force with your hand if you have a lighter string gauge and a lower action. And if you are doing these stretches on a regular basis, your hands will be far more prepared to play the sounds that you want to get.